So how has the recent drop in oil prices affected Latin American countries such as Mexico or Venezuela? Well, joining me to discuss is Juan Flores from the University of Geneva. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start off by looking at the greater area of Latin America. What growth expectations are there for the region?
So I think there are very different and contrasting situations between countries that are really dependent on commodity prices. For instance, made in South America, Argentina, for instance, or Venezuela. And on the other hand, we have, the upper part of the region, probably Mexico and Central America, which are more integrated with the US area. So taking into account these two different positions, that means that what we should expect is the recovery will be affecting both sub-regions differently. So on the one hand, we'll have countries that really much will depend on how China will perform. On the other hand, pretty much on countries that will depend on the US recovery.
Okay, let's look to the drop in oil prices. So when we think about this, we tend to think of the bigger players such as the US or Saudi Arabia. But let's look at countries like Mexico, Venezuela. How have they been affected?
Well, both countries are the major oil producing and exporting countries in the region. That said, let's say economic situation of both countries is very different. So on the one hand, the extreme case is Venezuela. So Venezuela's exports are dependent about 70% on oil. And Mexico, that's different. The figure is about 20% or even less. So that means that Venezuela, the export has fallen, and but also the government income has taken a big shot, and that means that about 90% of the income depends on oil. That means that the government has to find alternative financing resources. They can't go to the capital markets. It's very difficult to get new loans, and that means that inflation will continue to go up. It's about 100% right now. Mexico, there are other sectors that are exporting pretty well. I would say the car industry. The last year we had about 11% of growth of the exports in cars and other manufacturers. That means that Mexican economy is more diversified. But still, oil is important. Oil is important for government budget, and we should see that that will affect negatively to some extent also to Mexico.
So Mexico's government has recently announced quite a strong budget cut. So what consequences could this have on public investment and growth?
Yeah, so Mexican government has argued that the budget cuts will mainly affect current expenditure, and so we will see about 65% or 70% of current expenditure being reduced, and on the other hand, public investment should be reduced in a far less extent. The problem is not really government dependencies, but rather what's going to happen with the public companies. So we're talking here about Pemex or the electricity company, and here the budget cuts will affect their expenditure levels and will affect also public investment here. So oil production and electricity production. That's going to be bad from two perspectives. The first perspective is that, we're going to start in a new era where competition will be bigger in the oil sector and Pemex will have less weapons to fight with. And on the other hand, the side effects of these budget cuts in terms of public investment will be high, and so we should expect it to more or less extent also economic growth will kind of fall.
Well, it's definitely an area of massive interest, so thank you for your insight today, Juan.
Thank you very much.
That's all from Juan and myself for now. Thank you for tuning in, and remember to keep clicking back. Bye for now.